put my, okay, so I'll just put this down the corner maybe. All right, well, I'm sure something will go wrong because during demos, things always go wrong, but I think I'm all ready.
You have live demo? It needs to go wrong. Man.
It has to go wrong, right?
Yeah. Okay, we are live on YouTube now. I will put your
Maybe I'll just do that.
Copy what you posted here.
Actually, Luke, I think it would be nice if we can see you.
During the presentation, or?
Yeah, I think it just, if someone just joined randomly, they will know like who's presenting. It's just an idea. There's no strong preference on my end.
Maybe I will, I can turn that on in a moment.
Yeah.
That way I can make funny faces and.
Yeah, you can practice your facial muscles.
I actually used to do theater, and we would actually do that before the show started. You know, like kind of limber up and stretch, and then do all sorts of stuff with your face and your mouth.
Right. I think the stream is not live yet, right?
Yeah, it is. So let me share the link with you.
Got it. Yeah. Daniel, I see that you use another background in another meeting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I use different backgrounds.
Just start collecting some nice backgrounds.
Hey, Karen.
Yes.
Because I won't have Slack or anything open, if you
I can
something that I should change,
text you.
Can you? Yeah, just text me. Yeah, my phone's on Do Not Disturb, but
yep.
I'll check it periodically.
Yep, sounds good.
I was doing a dry run of this earlier this morning, and I got a little pop-up on my computer that let me know it was going to restart in 30 seconds. So I've deferred my security update for the benefit of the security community, but I'm hoping that does not happen this time around.
Yeah, you know, that's also very common thing. Like you're doing a live presentation and then security update or something like that. What can go wrong?
I know, Daniel. Hopefully it's an understanding audience, because I think we've all had demos.
I think everyone knows that and everyone gets it sometimes. So I posted a link on a chat, so you can go to the YouTube and see how it works. We have small delay over there, and we are getting some people, I think, not yet, but we will be getting them. And I also posted the links to presentation. Let me check also, like, let me do this one. Presentation.
If I click on the online event link, I will be connected to like OWASP Poland page, but not the live stream.
Which one? No, I posted the link on chat, but let me also post it on the, let me post it also here. So.
Okay, and you're saying to get to the live event on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link on the event page, actually.
Yeah, so now there is a link on the event page as well.
Okay.
In the comment, I just put it.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's on the, I can post it also.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me quickly test it.
Can one of you send a chat message to Zoom? I want to see how it pops up, given that I'm presenting full screen. Actually, if.
Yeah, I can send something. Can you see, Luke?
I'm looking now, chat. Okay. Do you see the chat window if I have that open?
No.
Okay.
It will be not seen by the people.
Great. I'm going to try to keep that open then. This is really where I wish I had a home setup with a monitor and desk right now, or 2 monitors.
All right. Do you guys need me, or I can drop and I'll join on YouTube?
You can join on YouTube and yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Feel free to welcome everyone and send a chat message. I will answer as a.
Will do. Thank you so much. See you guys
Welcome.
later.
Okay.
See you.
Daniel, have you all done an online meetup yet?
You mean me as me or me as a Poland chapter?
As the Poland chapter.
No, it's a fourth online meetup.
Oh, nice.
We do it every 2 weeks.
Nice.
That's actually how Karen found us. I hope.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's. I hope this one will be good. And how long do you think it will take? 1 hour? So...
Yeah, I think probably closer to 45 minutes, honestly.
Okay.
And it's meant to be kind of interesting with the delay. It's meant to be somewhat interactive. So my hope is that people do have an opportunity to play around with the tool themselves. But if they don't, it's not the end of the world. They'll see what I do.
Okay, I see over 10 people right now on YouTube. So
Fantastic.
we have some audience already. I hope there will be more. Let us wait another 3 minutes. We'll start the conversation, and then I hope we'll start the presentation.
Great. Is our audio going through to YouTube right now?
Yeah, it is.
Fantastic.
Since a couple minutes. Actually, I think right now you can even maybe switch the instead of having the presentation, just see your face.
Oh yeah,
at
sure.
At the beginning. So if I do.
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Let me see. Do this. If it changes something. Do you mind if I welcome everyone in Polish first?
Oh, please do. I'll warn you that I did not practice the presentation in Polish, though.
The name of the presentation in Polish will be very hard, actually. So
it's hard in English. I think that's good user experience feedback.
Yeah.
What we'll learn is I think that's the world of static analysis, has some terms that are not immediately obvious what they mean. But
yeah, probably that's all about NLP and everything connected with that stuff. Like, no, it came actually from the research, correct? All those NLP and machine learning and deep learning and all of that stuff. So it has to have a lot of difficult word, because
Yes.
if you are writing scientific papers, you need to have a lot of difficult word.
And if you're going to work for 4 years on it for a PhD, it's got to sound good. I think the thing that kind of I got a kick out of, I didn't start my career doing static analysis or any kind of compilers work. And as I've kind of gone deeper and deeper into that world, my realization is like, oh, it's really just graph traversal, graph searching, kind of all boils down to that. But instead we call them, trees, and they have abstract syntax and, kind of all these little modifiers that disguise the fact that we're doing effectively graph search.
That's correct. Actually, we have first comment on YouTube that even in Poland we use Polish or Polenglish anyway for technical talk, because actually, to be honest, even if you take your everyday job, you use a lot of English words. Right now, I'm using only English in my job, but yeah, it used to be Polish as well, and some of the words are not even translated to Polish. It's just English. So when you talk to programmers in Poland, some people like non-technical cannot understand even a single sentence. So we have 6:30 already. So maybe we can start. Cześć wszystkim. Witam Was bardzo serdecznie na kolejnym meetupie z OWASP-em. Mam nadzieję, że tym razem będzie kolejna prezentacja na bardzo wysokim poziomie. Hello everyone, we have Luke O'Malley with us. Hi Luke.
Hey, how's it going, Daniel?
Yeah, it's pretty good. How are you? How are you
Good.
doing during this COVID situation and all of that stuff?
We're making do, and I'm very excited that I get to chat with OWASP Poland, which I think is really because of the COVID situation. So there's a silver lining there.
Oh yeah, I think we didn't even think about having the online meetups because the normal meetups work just fine, and we like having beer during the meetup. But
so should I not be drinking my beer right now, even though it's 9 a.m. my time?
Oh yeah, no, you can.
Fantastic.
We don't care. Yeah. So I think this pretty good works actually during this COVID situation, and maybe we'll also do it later to have more people engaged, to have better presentations and better speakers, because probably on my Silesian meetup or even in Warsaw, we cannot have you just like this today, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so still we have some people coming into the meetup. Maybe instead of starting just right away, I will ask a couple questions. So look, what is your experience with OWASP? Have you participated in any OWASP projects? You can recommend any, or you like any OWASP project? Yeah,
so maybe to start. So I haven't directly contributed to any of the OWASP projects. So I think involvement has been more as a community member. So kind of attending meetings within the Bay Area. So San Francisco and Bay Area generally is quite active, has active chapters. So mostly participated there and then through conferences. I would say that there's not a particular OWASP project that I spend like most of my time in. I think because like the nature of my work, I actually spend more of my time thinking about the OWASP top 10 categories. So classification schemes for security issues. And one of the ones that I don't know how like publicized or known it is yet, but there's an alternative to the OWASP top 10 list that is for APIs specifically. And I think it's maybe a year old or a year and a half old. And I just wanted to pop over to it real quick because I actually have it up. So if folks haven't seen this before, I think it's a really neat classification that is maybe more like modern web app centric. And so I've been actually using this more and more, but that's been a recent favorite OWASP project.
Yeah, great. Actually, OWASP top 10 for APIs is very important. We have also OWASP top 10 for mobile, if you don't know, and just normal OWASP top 10 for web application. Yeah. So this is pretty important project, and I hope this one is actually very helpful when you even developing the application, so you can see what are the most cases you need to secure.
Yep. Yeah, actually, there's so I met Anon at one of the security conferences in California at AppSec Cali, and I do know that he does like to give presentations on this. So if folks want to learn more about it, I suspect that you could message Anon, and he would be happy to give you his presentation. Just he has really good examples of what these things look like in practice.
Okay, I see. That's great. Okay, it's already 5 minutes later. We have 20 people, but it's
Great.
going to be more and more, I hope. We have some first hi. So hi everyone. I'm just going to leave the floor to Luke. And Luke, you are free to leave your video or stay on video or just stop your video, but please go ahead with the presentation. Good luck, and I will see you at the end of the presentation.
Fantastic, thank you. Appreciate it, Daniel. So I guess get started. Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to virtually travel to give the presentation. So my name is Luke, and I'm the co-founder of R2C. And I'm also its head of product. So day to day, I'm thinking about, hey, what are we building? What are the problems that people are experiencing? And basically just like, how do we sequence actually building features and fixing bugs? I started my career as a software engineer, mostly writing Java at a company called Palantir, based out of the Bay Area. And before that, I was at MIT and I studied electrical engineering and computer science. So I started as a software engineer and then transitioned to product management. The company that I started with two of my best friends from college is called R2C, and we're a San Francisco-based static analysis startup. And our mission is to profoundly improve software security and reliability. The main thing that we think about day to day is how do you identify bugs? How do you spot security issues in code? And ideally, as close as possible to code creation. So, if you're writing code, ideally it's in your editor. Hey, boom, there's a bug, this could be a problem, or when you commit your code or when it gets deployed to, you push it up to GitHub for a pull request, something like that. So that's what we think about day to day. And for the purpose of this talk, there's an open source tool that we maintain called SemGrep. And so I really want to show you what this tool is, how it works, and maybe why it might be useful for you. And kind of if you want to choose whether or not you want to stick around for the talk, here's the TLDR. So the first thing, I guess this is kind of my personal opinion, or the opinion of folks at R2C, is that it's really easy to write insecure code. And if you start to really read into documentation for different frameworks that you might use or developers that you support might use, there's just all these gotchas. So there's often notes that the notes are probably the most important thing. So if you see a little note, I really encourage you to read it. But there's all these like rough edges that as a software engineer, you need to think about when you write code and kind of program around them. So those are the things that make it easy to write basically insecure or maybe bad code. So our philosophy, and what I want to kind of push over the course of this talk, is there is a future that gets us away from insecure code. And it's something that I've heard more and more described as the paved road. And so the idea here is that there are frameworks that are default safe. So a really good example of this is React, right? Where they're very explicit about when you are doing work that's going to affect like inner HTML elements. And so it's explicitly labeled dangerously set inner HTML. So we think of that as default safe because you know when you're going to escape any of the kind of safety or security mechanisms that React has as a developer. Another really good example of something that's maybe default safe is using an object relational mapper. So something like SQL Alchemy, which helps you sidestep a whole bunch of issues like SQL injection and kind of other, so just like general injection type attacks. So there exist these frameworks that are, I think, basically make it much harder to do something that's dangerous. And we should try to push developers towards using those frameworks. Big question then is, hey, how do we actually do this? So one way that you might think about doing this is grep. And I'd be curious, there's a little bit of a delay in video. So I'll let Daniel message me your responses. But I'm curious how many folks have used grep to search through source code and specifically to try to find occurrences of maybe like a particular method or look for security issues. So I think it's one of probably the most powerful, we'll say, static analysis tools there is, because it works in all languages. But it's not particularly, I don't say expressive, like it doesn't understand what source code is or what its meaning is. So it's just working on text. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have more traditional static analysis. And so there's a whole class of tools that fall under SAST. And these tend to be a little bit more complicated or slow for enforcement, or harder to express some kind of custom check. So when I look at that landscape and kind of want to get to, hey, what is SemGrep? Really where SemGrep comes in is we wanted something that was really fast to run. So it felt like grep, just wicked fast. And that was really easy to use. So I think we've all learned how to use grep over time, and now it's just kind of a go-to tool for us. But that also understands the meaning of code that's going to work across languages, and ideally that's open source. So over the course of the talk, we'll cover what SemGrep is, and we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into grep and static analysis tools. So one question, I guess, just to get started is, I'd be curious for y'all in the chat, how many folks have used grep to search source code? And also, are you using kind of maybe more traditional static analysis tools today? And that'll help me change the talk as I go. Okay, so quick outline. I'll give some background on SemGrep as a tool. We'll talk about grep and abstract syntax trees. So what does code look like to a static analysis tool? We'll do a little bit of, call it pair programming. And then we'll end the talk by going beyond the command line. And we'll look at, hey, how would I deploy these types of enforcements in CI/CD? And we'll also look at a registry that we have with a lot of checks in it. So just to get started, you can visit semgrep.dev, which is just going to redirect you to our GitHub page. Encourage you to follow the project, file issues on us. Contributions are certainly welcome. So really trying to build the community around this tool, and it is up on the web. So SemGrep is not new. And this actually is great. There's years and years worth of learning behind SemGrep. So it was established in 2009. And the first version of it was written at Facebook. It was originally called sgrep. Sgrep. We've renamed it to SemGrep. So it was sgrep or PIF. And it was used at Facebook to enforce nearly 1,000 rules. So they were trying to get developers onto this paved road, this paved path. And the original author of it, someone named Johan Padalu, joined R2C last year. And Johan was the first static analysis hire at Facebook. He was previously doing his PhD at INRIA, has a long history with OCaml and a long history with static analysis. And he was a contributor to a project called Cosinel. So Cosinel is a tool that is used for doing large-scale kind of bug detection and refactors in the Linux kernel. So if you're familiar with Cosinel, SemGrep is really just the next generation or latest generation of that tool. And so there's a lot of concepts that are shared, and even some syntax that's shared. So there's this tool that's been used to fix, I think, thousands of bugs and change thousands of lines of code in Linux code base. And that has now been brought out to this tool that I'm going to show you today. And then quickly just, hey, what languages this support? So I talked about it being multilingual. So right now we have really good support for Python, JavaScript, Go, Java, and C. And we're working on Ruby and TypeScript, and really are looking for, hey, you as a community member, you as a user, what are the languages that you care about the most? And it's also openly licensed. So just take a pause for a second. If there's any questions that people have, if I went too fast through that section, I'll slow down the presentation a little bit. If you wouldn't mind sending those over, and I'm happy to jump back and spend a little bit of time answering questions just about the background of the project. I'm just going to check if there are any questions that have come through. Awesome, and I will slow down, so thank you for that feedback. Awesome. So we talked about grep, and we talked about static analysis tools. And what I want to point out about those two things is that, on the grep side, you're looking at strings, and strings are not code. This is not a tree. So tree representation that I have on the right is what most static analysis tools are going to work with. So when you're using a static analysis tool and there's a specific rule that's running, if you've used ESLint, for an example, there's a rule called no eval. You're expressing a node visitor. So you're actually looking at, a node like, hey, for def index, with a child, let's look at name and let's look at func, and you kind of traverse this this tree. That is basically like necessary for a tool. Like you have to work with the tree and you have to work with code in this format to have a tool that doesn't have a lot of false positives. And there's a really nice, I guess, example that I have here just to show you kind of on the two ends of the spectrum. You're used to grep, it's very quick. But if you wanted to write something that was using the tree, this is that no eval rule that I was talking about before. There are, it's a 307 line file. And it's just not the world's most complicated rule, but just to show you kind of what these tools are working in. You have to have a lot of knowledge about the JavaScript. You have like, hey, what is a member expression? And just kind of like looking through quickly. There's all sorts of stuff like node.parent, member expression again, or call expression. So one of the downsides that we found when working with these tools is that you have to be an expert in the syntax of the language that you're going to work with. So it makes it very hard if you're at a company, for instance, that has maybe a multilingual environment. So you've got a Go backend, a TypeScript front end, maybe you've got a little bit of Python. Your company's been around for a while, and so there's some Java. So if you wanted to quickly figure out, hey, let's get users onto this paved road, let's start to search source code quickly, you'd have to go and learn a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different syntaxes. And there are a lot of tools already out there. So the great news is that you can get started with linting or static analysis today. Bandit, dlint, there's GoSec, Rubocop, TSLint. So there's lots of great tools. And you can extend these, but again, you're going to have to learn the specifics of the AST that those tools are designed to work with. And there's commercial tools as well that I think are generally more complicated. They're slow, they're not necessarily CI friendly. So if you're trying to run this on every single build, and they can be expensive. So just to try to frame everything as background for this project, there's a really nice article called Static Analysis at Scale. It was written by Benjamin Woodruff at Instagram. And I really like the spectrum that they set out. So on the left-hand side, you can have easy but maybe dumb checks. And so that's more regex based. Or you can have this kind of slower whole program analysis. It's very powerful, but it's very complex. And where a tool like SemGrep comes in is it's somewhere in the middle. So this is actually working on the syntax tree, but it's going to look a lot like grep. And so you actually have a tool where we're going to drive down that false positive rate. Yeah, I guess you can actually think in code, which is really nice. And something maybe I didn't actually point out, if I just go back to this, this no eval example, this does not look anything like the source code that I'm trying to match. So the difficulty that I've had when I've written these rules is I don't get to say, oh yeah, I can picture the code in my mind. I know what I want to try to find or what I want to try to enforce. But then I have to kind of do this like mental gymnastics to figure out, okay, but this is actually a tree. So in the tree world, what does this code look like? And it just gets really, really complicated. So what I want to then show you is let's actually just, I think, dive into the command line. Maybe just to get started, something that I potentially would want to grep for is the usage of cookies in my project. And the reason why I bring this up is that it's just really easy to write, going back to like easy to write and secure code. When I was looking about how cookies work in Flask specifically, I was reading through the documentation. There's 3 very important keys that have what I would describe as unsafe default values. So in this case, secure is equal to false, HTTP only is equal to false, same site is set to none. So if secure is false, it's going to be available over HTTP. which means that I could be sending a cookie over that unencrypted, I guess, connection. So could be observed by an adversary. And then if I look at stuff like HTTP only, I probably want this to be true, an extension to the cookie. So not supported by all browsers, but generally something I want to set to true. And then same site, you probably want to set to lax. So this is like, hey, as a developer, I'm just going through, I'm trying to get my feature out. I'm going to use a cookie. I'm not necessarily going to read the documentation closely enough to know that this is just not what I should be doing. I need to be very explicit about secure set to true and HTTP only set to true. So what I want to do then is, like, for my own code base, when I read this, I was like, okay, let's just go take a look and just see all the places where we do anything with cookies, and I'll do a manual audit. So just to kind of step through a couple examples here of different ways that people might use set cookie in a code base. And then I'll switch over to the command line and actually run the tool. So the first one, very vanilla usage of set cookie. The next one, this is actually an alias. So if you can just imagine ahead a little bit, if you're using grep and you're looking for like set cookie as your regex, it's going to miss this aliasing, which would be bad. Ooh, I actually have here like secure equals true. So this could be something that I don't want to fire on. Could be interesting. What if you have multi-line things? So I don't know if anyone has tried to write a regex pattern for multi-lines. And then just looking, like, you might have commented out code here. So it'd probably be a false positive with a grep. And then the last example is fine. So kind of one meta thought is, you know, if you're writing Python or really in any language, there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So one has, this is default arguments. Here's an import and rename. This one actually starts to use keyword arguments, but obviously grep's not going to understand that. Multi-lines are going to throw you off. Commented out code is going to throw you off. And you might want to try to match on some kind of prefix here. So let me show you in practice what this looks like. So I've set up the exact same code that I was just showing, the example I was walking through. I've just set up locally. So this is the code here. And just to cheat a little bit, I've already rewritten out the grep. So the first thing that I did is I went through my code base and I just ran grep and looked for all the places where there's response.set cookie set. So quickly go through grep, and immediately there's like the comments show up as expected. It's fine. I mean, it's there's only 6 or so findings here, so it's not unmanageable. But if I'm working in a 100,000, 500,000 million line code base, this could become untenable. It's also missing that import aliasing, which is not great. So what I want to now introduce, I guess, is semgrep. And what I'm going to show you is, so using semgrep, I'm going to search a Python file. So I'm just specifying the language. And I'm going to express the pattern that I want to match on. What's really nice is I just think about in semgrep, hey, what does the code look like that I want to match? So in this case, what I care about is calls to Flask's response set cookie method. Right, so that's what I'm looking at, and I'm going to search for that within cookie.py. But if we're actually looking at something with code meeting, so this would be a function call, but it would be a function call that doesn't have any arguments. So this is like interpreted, I'd say, like literally. So we have this really nifty operator, kind of equivalent to .star from a regex that just says, hey, 3 dots. We call it the ellipsis operator. I don't care what arguments are going to get past the set cookie. And I'm going to use the ellipsis a lot because it's a very, very powerful concept in semgrep. So I can quickly run that on cookie.py. And immediately we see we have gotten the rename. So this is that aliasing. So that's very cool. So it's actually aware of how Python works. We did detect the whole multi-line response. That's kind of interesting. Not so important for the purpose of doing my audit. And we've also excluded all of the commented out code. So this just shows that like comments and kind of the maybe the visual fluff of writing code isn't actually there, isn't checked. And I know for a lot of folks, we like to pipe tools together and compose tools. So there actually is a JSON output. I think I'm just missing a space. So there's also a JSON output. So this becomes really easy to add into your pipeline. And put other tools after it. And so that's what we've done. And I'll show you a little bit more of this as we go on. So I want to take a quick pause. Are there any questions with what I've shown you so far? So just quickly did a comparison. Hey, here's how I would solve this problem in grep to audit for set cookie. And then I'm going to use semgrep instead and just see how it differs and maybe how I would express a similar pattern. So I'll wait 1 second for questions to come in if there are any. And while I wait, just going to show you just a grep versus semgrep comparison. So in grep, there were 4 true positives. When I looked at the output on the command line, there was 4 true positives, 1 false positive, and 1 false negative. So not a great score overall. And then in semgrep, there were 5 true positives, and those are all expected with no false positives and no false negatives. Okay, and then for reference later, if you want to see the commands that I ran, they are right there. Okay, so that's a little bit of humor. If you're using regexes, you probably have more problems than when you started, right? So regexes are quite fragile. And the other thing, in the example I showed you, it's helpful on the command line to do a quick audit of set cookie. But what I really want to do is find all the places where I'm not using set cookie correctly. So I'm going to jump over. I'm going to move away from the command line for a minute, and I'm going to move to, we have an online editor. So this is just meant to be a quick, easy place for you to go to play around with patterns. And on the command line, what we're effectively doing, so you see flask.response.setCookie here, we were doing a single pattern, but semgrep supports, we call it a multi-pattern syntax. And this is kind of something that if you're trying to develop a rule that you would want to eventually give to maybe put in front of a developer. So you're going to run this at CI time, and you're going to fail a build if someone is insecurely using cookies. There's some other information that we'd want to be able to provide to that person. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set an ID. So set secure cookie, or maybe we'll do, yeah, we'll call it set secure cookie, and we can give it a message like, please securely set your cookies. So very easy. So the patterns field here lets us compose multiple patterns together using Boolean logic. So you can say, this is implicitly an and statement. So what we had before was we had flask.response.setCookie. So I want to find all occurrences of that pattern. But there is a case where it's actually OK to use setCookie in our code base. And I'm just looking down here. So it's this example just at the bottom. So this person, or in this particular example, we've set secure to true, and we've set HTTP only to true. And those are really the things that I care about. So what I find myself doing a lot when I'm composing patterns is I just copy and paste code. So I'll just copy and paste that in. And then I use the generally like the ellipsis operator. So I don't really care about what maybe the default arguments are. I actually don't care about same site equal to lax in this particular example. But what does need to be true is that secure is set to true and HTTP only is set to true. If I do this, the goal is I'm not just doing an audit. I actually have a very tailored, very precise check at this point in time. So I'm going to try to run this, and we'll see what I have done wrong. Cookie, true. And what I'll do is, just to save myself the embarrassment, I'll jump to my pre-configured example here. So I'm not immediately sure what was wrong with my last example, but this is the same thing. So pattern not, I've got my flask.response.setCookie here. And I actually get matches in all of the places I expect. So yep, like this does not have those keyword arguments set. Same with this one, not set. And then that final example was done correctly, so we don't flag it. I mentioned that in a language, there's a lot of different ways, usually to accomplish the same thing. So in Python, keyword arguments, right? So these are these named arguments here. The order of them does not matter. So it's a dictionary in Python at the end of the day. And that's something that really, really cool semgrep understands. So what we call kind of a code equivalence. So I can change the order of these keyword arguments, and semgrep under the hood still understands that this code is semantically the same. So it means the same thing, even though it has been expressed differently than the way that I expressed it in my pattern. And so basically what this ends up meaning for you if you're using semgrep is that you don't need to think through all of the kind of complexities or different ways of expressing something in a language. We're handling a lot of that detail for you. So much more complicated example than what we had before, mainly because we've got a message and I've just introduced this pattern syntax. But what I'm trying to, I guess, demonstrate is that you can use this in a simple case, very simple way on the command line. And then once you realize you want more power, you want to make something that's maybe more kind of consumer friendly, you're going to give it to other people, or you want to run it regularly and provide context, then you can go up and start to use our Boolean logic and our YAML syntax. So, hey, as I'm going through this, if you have questions, just throw them in the chat and I'll answer them as we go and as I see them pop up in Zoom, since I'm in a different system. So any questions on that? And while those questions come in, there is documentation for this configuration. So there's a number of flags. We're going to talk about some more of them over the course of the presentation. Some that I'm particularly excited about. So pattern not. There's a regex pattern. So we're going to get to that in a moment. And we talked about patterns being an explicit like and statement. There's also an or equivalent. So pattern either, which will work for you as well. Okay. So big question is, well, I showed you this online editor. I showed you the command line. Can I run my editor rules on the command line? And my answer is yes, absolutely you can. So let me show you what that looks like. There is a little share button here. So I'm just going to click share. And that gives me a unique URL. And if I pop over the command line, I can just run semgrep. I can pass it a configuration file that can be a URL. And I will run this on cookie.py. Boom. So it runs, it actually downloaded that config from the editor, presents the message that we had there. And unlike when I was just running semgrep with that -e, flag, it was just a general audit. So it found all of the cases where I was using set cookie. Now that I'm using my refined rule, I'm actually only picking up the 4 cases where we are insecurely setting the cookie. One of the questions that I got is, have we tried to connect the tool to any machine learning? We have not yet. We have not played with that. We do, for the rules that we write, we do a fair amount of tuning. So we'll run them across thousands of projects and try to understand, hey, where can we actually improve this thing? So we'll do that, but it's more, I would say, like statistical approaches rather than any kind of machine learning approach. There's also a question, do you plan to make some VS Code plugin for semgrep? Yes, that is definitely on our roadmap, and I think really looking for, honestly, help from the community. So we have a very basic integration that we've played with. So on save, semgrep will run, on file save, semgrep will run on that file, but it's not particularly mature yet. So we're looking for help on that one. And then there's a question, is aliasing supported in method arguments like set cookie? So I'll actually just copy out this question because I'll show you in the editor. So someone was asking, just going to break the syntax for a second. Someone was asking if I could do aliasing like this. We have some aliasing. So if people declare a constant, we will propagate the value of that constant throughout the code. we are currently, for Python in particular, doing work so that for values, if you're doing like true, false, understanding, hey, has this been modified at any point? And can we actually assume what this value would be? So I think offhand, this one may not work right now, but it's something that we're starting to tackle because I think it's a fantastic use case for the tool. Okay. So another question would be, hey, so I can run rules locally that I've written in this online editor. Can I save my rules locally? Can I have a local YAML file? And I think you've already seen the slide, but the answer to that is yes as well. So we're trying to make this tool something that is easy to put into CI, easy to run on a regular basis. So what I've done here is I've actually copied that YAML file down already. So this is exactly what we had in the online editor. And I can just run semprep, again, -- config, and I'll just specify cookie.yaml, and I'll run it on my cookie example. And magically, thankfully in a demo, nothing has broken too terribly yet, but magically that actually does work. So these pattern files can get quite long, and I'll show you there's an alternative to just having a long pattern file, and that's actually to use the registry and to publish collections of checks to then use. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. Okie dokie. So keep the questions coming. I'll keep checking it every once in a while. The next example I want to show is for send file. So let's just open this up. So this is another Python example. I'll show you a Java example in a little bit. Note that there's many different languages that are supported here. I program more in Python, so that's why I've chosen to use most of my examples in Python. So I had mentioned earlier that my approach to writing rules is to basically just like copy the code that I want to match and then start to make modifications or edits to it. So in this example, what I'm trying to do is find endpoints. So looking for things that are decorated with app.route, where a input, like an argument or a, I guess, parameter to that endpoint makes its way into send file. And basically the kind of assumption here is maybe this is user controlled and this is not something that I ever want to allow happen. So just to get started, I'm going to use app.route as kind of like a signature of something that I care about. So I don't really care about what the arguments are that are passed to it. So I'm just going to abstract those details away and do ... The other thing, the next step is I don't know what this method's going to be called. So instead of being explicit here, I'm going to use something that we call meta variables. And meta variables, kind of a closest proxy that I can think of is it's almost like a capture group. So it's a greedy, I guess it's in some ways it's actually like a named, I think named ellipsis operator, but it's an opportunity for me to abstract away some of the details. And I also don't know that the argument's called file name, so I'm just going to call my variable fname. Let's see here. So print statements, I actually don't know what someone's going to have in this method, so I'll just do ellipsis operator again and just say, hey, there's probably some other code there. What I care about is that it ends with a return statement to send file. And I already have a variable called fname, right? So that's going to actually get propagated through. And I've got no idea what other parameters people are going to pass. I'll just abstract those away and don't care. And let's see if I can get a match here. Okay, so I don't get a match. And my first question is like, well, this looks like it exactly matches. Well, there's one little nuance here, and that's that send file is actually imported from Flask. So one of the things that I'll need to do in semprep is actually fully qualify the name here. There's some ways around this. So if I didn't know that this was from Flask, so just to show you real quick, if I rerun, now I actually get the match. If I didn't know where send file was coming from, for some reason, you don't know what the package is named, I could just abstract away the detail and just say, hey, there's some package here. I don't care what it is. And and I still want to match. But generally what I'll do is I just be clear that if there's a function that I'm searching for in particular, I'll use this kind of fully qualified name, and then it'll match without any issue. So this is pretty cool, right? Because we're actually saying, hey, there's something that was passed into this function and eventually gets used in send file. And that's great for bug hunting. So honestly, this is also a tool you can use for general bug hunting. So I know I keep throwing stuff at you. So if there are questions, please do share them in the chat. More fun that way as well. Okay, so let's talk about how you can combine semgrep with regex. I think you probably could tell from the beginning of the presentation, I think grep is a phenomenal tool, and it is very powerful in basically the right setting. So what I want to show you is, what if I want to combine both really this like syntax aware, code aware pattern with something from regex. And in this case, I'm looking for calls to bodo3.client. And bodo3 is an AWS Python package. So in this case, I've introduced something called pattern inside. What this does is basically filters all of the subsequent patterns and says, hey, those patterns that I'm interested in have to occur within this parent. So in this case, what I'm looking for is bodo3.client. I do care about host. And eventually what I want to do is kind of match places where host has a IP address that's been defined. So it's totally fine in this example to pull from a Amazon AWS domain, but if it is a IP address, then that's bad. I don't want that. I think what I can do here is just specify, just go ahead and copy this, just write up a little quick regex. So maybe for some reason it's IP addresses that are coming from 192.168, like those are bad. So I'll just switch over and just type out some quick regex. So there's a period, there's going to be some number of digits, probably 1 through 3 if I'm following the spec correctly. And we'll say 1 through 3. Ooh, and my syntax is invalid. So let's go take a look at why that's the case. Cool. So that was because of my use of quotes. And I think this is probably a nuance with YAML, if I had to guess. So that's something that I'll file a little bit of a bug for after. So what's very cool is now that I've run this, I'm not matching both of the Bodo3 client calls below. I'm only matching the one that has a IP address that matches my regex. So just a cool way to combine these things. You can also actually do pattern regex as like a top level field. So one of the things, so for the folks that I've worked with, one of the probably best applications is like they say, hey, I already have a pile of regexes that I use, and we run them in CI. Like that's our static analysis. Well, fantastic. You should keep all those and ideally benefit from the tooling and the messaging and the output that semgrep provides you. And so you can just use pattern regex as a top level field, and it will still match. So if you already have regexes, you can just bring them over, and then you get all of the infrastructure for free. So super cool use of the tool. And there's a open source project in the Python community called Zulip, and they've started to do this. So they've got a bunch of regex rules, and they've started to port these over to semgrep. Okay. Yeah, I guess just kind of taking a pause. I feel like I've thrown a bunch of stuff at you all. Are there any questions at all about the syntax, what would match, what won't match, anything like that? Would love to take a moment to answer those questions. And while those come in, I wanted to just like shift our mindset a little bit. So I feel like we've mostly been looking at auditing. Like, hey, there's some method call, and we want to make sure that people don't use it, or maybe it's an indicator of like a code hotspot. So a slightly different use case is enforcing business logic. And so let's just go through this. This example is going to be in Java, so you can prove to you that it works in other languages. And what I want to show here is kind of the toy problem is like, oh, I have a financial application, and we're going to make transactions. And we just need to make sure that before we make a transaction, we've actually verified it. So what I can do is just codify that. So here we have multiple patterns that we're using, and we're going to use pattern and pattern not. So I want to identify all of the places where we make a transaction. But if I look at pattern not, there is not a verified transaction preceding it. So in this case, I've used meta variables just to, again, abstract away some of the details. So I don't know the name of the method. I don't know what its return types are. I don't care, what the arguments to it are. There might be code that is before my make transaction. There might be code that's after it. So just somewhere within this method, I'm looking for make transaction. And I'll go ahead and run that. And there's a number of cases where this detects. So first case, pretty simple. We're just making make transaction. No verify has happened. Looks like a developer typoed. So they accidentally put make transaction before verified transaction. And a really interesting case, maybe they're interspersed. So these don't actually occur right next to each other, and they're out of order. So make transaction before verify. And there's an interesting case that I would have expected to catch at the bottom, but it doesn't. It's not caught. This is a false negative. So in this case, we call verify before make transaction. However, if you notice, the arguments are different. So I'm not actually verifying the thing that I'm making a transaction on. And so what I can do, so this is something that's bad that I want to flag, not because the ordering is wrong, but because these arguments are different. So we mentioned meta variables before. And if you look, I previously said that I don't care about the arguments to verify and make. But what I actually want to do is enforce that they're the same thing. And meta variables are, I guess, let's say, like defined once across a pattern. So if I use this $T here as my transaction, I guess, like value, it will be enforced to be consistent later on in that same pattern. So if I rerun this with this change, you can see that we actually will now flag this bottom case. And this is a really good example of you got to iterate on rules a little bit. So obviously false positives are bad, particularly if you're trying to put false positives or you put false positives in front of a developer. Not good. Very, very quick to reject the tool and reject your beautiful check that you've spent so much time writing. So while false positives are bad, I would expect that there's always going to be iteration. So my take is like, it's okay if you can fix it quickly. And this is a great example where, I got a little bit of additional information because I went through, I saw that this just wasn't precise enough. I make a change and I redeploy or go ahead and save that new pattern. So kind of just like this nice loop. And let's see here. There's some other niceties too. So sometimes, you just can't express what you want to using semgrep syntax. And so we have a little bit of a safety valve here. There's a pattern where Python key that you can use, and it lets you do some very light scripting. So in this particular case, this is kind of cool. We look for places where the name of the variable, so this is this $F meta variable. We look for places where it might be called price. And if it's called price, then you definitely don't want to be using this like Django float field column or sorry, value type. Instead, you want to be using something that's a decimal field for currency. So again, you wouldn't be able to express that in the semgrep syntax alone. You actually would need to jump over, and that's a detail you could express in Python instead, much more easily. I've seen this used as well for detecting key lengths. So it's like, oh, I want to make sure that the entropy of a string is greater than some value, not 1024, but 2048, something like that. And so you could use the same type of Python ability to test that the value is greater than some threshold. So wow, but that's arbitrary code execution. That's very scary, and there are some limitations here. So in order to use patterns that have this, you have to use a non-default flag in subgrep, which is dangerously allow arbitrary code execution from rules. So you want to be using this on rules that you know the origin of. And we do vetting as well for some of the public checks. So just a really nice kind of safety hatch for you. And that's basically it for, I guess, for writing rules. I kind of wanted to show you some of the other stuff that we built on top of it. So because it's such a Unix-like tool, and you can compose it really easily with other systems. So I kind of wanted to show what we've done next. So I'll just give folks a minute if there's any questions on syntax or writing rules or anything like that. And while we do that, I will go ahead and pull up the registry. So the way that I got here, just quickly, so semgrep.live is where the editor lives. So very easy, definitely go check it out. There are some examples that you can load as well. There is a tab here that I can click over to called registry. So registry, it's a bit, it's UI simple at the moment, so feedback welcome on this. But it is a place to go and see all of the rules that folks have written. And there are just hundreds of rules at this point. So just scrolling down, I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of rules that we've written and other members of the community have written. So one of the things that I'm actually probably most excited about, there is a security engineer. His name is Ajahn Abraham, and he's the author of Node.js Scan. So Ajahn just recently, it's a super popular tool. It was really exciting for us. He ported over all of his rules to semgrep. So the new version of Node.js Scan, which I think is in beta at the moment, will use semgrep as its core static analysis engine. So we've got a lot of his rules in here since he's published those to the system. So you can go through, you can look by language, severity, different categories here. What I'm going to click over to instead is actually these things that we call rule packs. So they're collections of rules. And I'm going to show you, we haven't done a Go example yet, so I think I will just show you a Go example. So this is a Go check pack. And this check pack doesn't have too many rules in it. So you can see the rules listed here. It is security and correctness focused. And what I want to do is I just want to run this rule pack on some Go code. So flipping back over to the command line, I can pop over. This is a Go project that I have. I'm just going to run clock just to show you kind of the composition of this project. So let's see. So there's 258 files in it. There's 46,000 lines of Go code. There's a little bit of Markdown and JSON and stuff. It's basically a pure Go project. So what I will do is just run this and see what we get. So you might have noticed it just said downloading that config. That's scanning the code. And then quickly in this project, actually, we find a couple things. So I'll just scroll back up to the top here. Mostly warnings like use of TLS. So found an HTTP server without TLS set. Use listen and serve TLS instead. So that's a great example of a really great example of, there is a safe method that you should use, and you're not using the safe method. So don't use listen and serve. Use listen and serve TLS. So that's a kind of a nice find, and it's easy. So if you have a project, I definitely invite you to explore the registry and look at the packs that we have. I think there's one for Python and Java and most of the other languages that we support. And there's more being contributed kind of every week. So if you've got an idea for a collection of checks, we'd love to hear it and actually help you publish that. So we're in the process of making that easier. Okay, so that's a little bit about the registry. And then what about integration? So It's interesting to run this tool one-off. We want to make it easy for folks in the community to run it on every single commit, every single pull request. So this is just looking at the documentation on semgrep.dev. And we have a GitHub action. So super easy to set up. It's I think it's just called semgrep action. So run this on every pull request. I'll show you that in a moment. And you can also use it as a pre-commit hook. So we're really, really big fans of the tool pre-commit. And you can just quickly set up semgrep in pre-commit. So I'm going to show you. Awesome. So I got one question. Where can we contribute and write our rules? Yeah, that's an awesome question. So there's a few options here. So the first option is maybe you're just hacking around on the editor and you've written a rule that you think is useful or cool for other people. So just looking quickly. Okay, so if you click on share, you can enter in a ID for the check and you can just publish it to the registry directly. So I'm just going to do test and I'll let someone yell at me later. So what this will do, I'm logged in. It will actually open a pull request on the public semgrep.rules repo. So the registry right now is very simple. Behind the scenes, it is just a registry. And so all of the checks that I was showing you and all of the check packs are actually just in this open source, openly licensed repository. And you can see, like, I click into Go, they're loosely categorized. So if I click through Go, there's a lot of files here. You can see that they're organized by framework first and foremost. So we've got some checks for Gorilla, gRPC, JWT Go, then by category, and then eventually get to the rules. So I would encourage, if you have a rule that you think is super cool, basically just hit publish. We'd love to have that contribution and help you iterate on the rule. The other thing that you can do, and this is still a workflow that we're working through. So kind of as we tease out, hey, what does this registry look like? We created a semgrep org, and folks like Ajin for Node.js scan have just created repositories within that org. So he maintains all of his checks here, and they publish out of this location. And you can actually see for Ajin, he's added his sponsor button to it, and he's added his own information. So a few different options. We're still playing with what's the right model for a registry, and should it be, Git backed, or should it be something more like maybe like an npm or Docker where you just publish your artifact. So feedback welcome there. Awesome. So if you feel like that answers the question, I will jump into quickly what this thing looks like in CI. So Isaac was one of my co-founders and the CEO of our company, opened up a pull request on a fork of libcloud. So what he did is, just for demo's sake, he went back and submitted a 21,000 line change. So quite a large change. But in it, this project has the semgrep action running on it. So we just honestly have fallen in love with GitHub Actions. We've found that they're pretty easy to use. So this is just a GitHub action that's run. So semgrep check. And it actually failed this build. And so here I can just click through and I'll actually get information about what failed. So if I look here in libcloud's Cloud Sigma driver, the specific line of code, in this case, there was a useless comparison. So they did node ID equals node ID. So this is probably a bug or a typo. Like, having looked at the code, I can confirm that this is a bug. So this is what it would look like in CI, where in this particular project, I'll just click out to the home project. We've added a GitHub workflows file. So where did those go? Let's look offhand. I thought it was under GitHub workflows, and there should be a semgrep action file here, but I'll just show you what the actual documentation looks like. So files are published to the GitHub marketplace. And yeah, so I'm not sure why that's not showing up, but there should be a GitHub workflows semgrep.yaml file. And just a little bit of light configuration, you can specify what rules you want to run, things like that. And then you'll get that nice CI output. So that's how we're using the tool at the moment. And then coming up next, so this is home stretch. I really appreciate everyone sticking with me throughout the presentation. Coming up next, we're adding more equivalences. So in some languages, like the order of addition operators doesn't matter. So we're adding more things like that. We're working on integrating typing information. So it'd be really, really nice to understand, hey, if someone's passing in a like verified transaction, for instance, maybe that is a type instead of a method we have to call. So kind of lets you get more precise with your checks. And we're adding support for more languages. So if there's a language that you're excited about, we'd love to hear more and get it on the roadmap and prioritized. And there is one more thing that I want to show you. So there is a feature that I skipped over before. And I think it's one of the probably most exciting features of SemGrep. So quick rule, I'll give you a little bit of context. You shouldn't use exit in your Python code. You should use sys.exit. And that is because exit is a helper for the interactive shell and is not necessarily available on all Python implementations. So like we ran into this bug, 30 seconds later, we had written a check for it, audited our whole code base, and now we scan for this on every commit going forward. So that's kind of part of that like paved road. Let's just push people onto the right methods, the right functions. So the fix for this is really easy. Instead of using exit, what I actually want to use, so I've added a fix field here, is sys.exit. And I just want to propagate whatever value, whatever arguments were in exit, it's a direct copy paste to sys.exit. And I mentioned before for meta variables that the value is maintained. So this is true across patterns, across pattern and fix, and actually even true across message. So I can use $X in my message template, and that will actually get filled out. So I'm going to go ahead and run this now that it has a fix. A few things you see. So we've actually fill out now the value of exit and can recommend, I guess I should really be doing it here. So we can fill out the value. And then you get an auto fix suggestion. And I can just apply those fixes outright. And this is a little bit of a toy example because it's in the command line, or sorry, it's in the editor. But if I switch over to the command line, let me just show you quickly on semgrep help. So if you read through semgrep.help, you'll see that there actually is a -a flag that you can pass. And this will just apply the auto fixes locally. And my encouragement to you all is that data loss can occur with the flag. So you do want to be doing this on files that are version controlled. So then you can actually go look at the git diff and ensure that the fix is correct. There's a question, can you also delete and add parameters dynamically? Yes, so I could add additional parameters here. I'm not sure exactly what sys.exit supports, but just for the sake of, I guess, example. So I could add other examples here. I'm doing a pretty generous match, right? So I'm saying like any arguments, meta variables are greedy. So any arguments that were an exit, I want to pass to sys.exit. I would have to break this up if I wanted to say, I care about the first argument, but not the rest, in which case this would just be the first argument. So there is some work you can do there. And it's meant right now mostly for simple fixes, but it is the beginning of a story that we're putting together and expect to have as a core part of the tool. And I'll just take a quick look. I think I saw another question come in. Can you only apply fixes to particular files, directories, or languages? Yeah, that's a good question. Let me show you. Just pop over real quick. So you may have noticed in the command line, I was specifying when I did semgrep before a -L flag here. This is also a field or like a parameter that is set in my rule. So there is a languages flag that you can have. And so I could have something like Python. So you can identify, hey, that this rule is specifically for the Python language, the Java language, the Go language. And then right now, the way that autofix works is it's for any of the files that you've scanned or analyzed, I will apply the autofix. But what you could do is you could downscope just what you're running SemGrep on. So if you notice at the end here, I've specified that I'm running it on cookie.py. Let's see here. At the very end, I'm just running on cookie.py. So it would only apply to that. There's also a bunch of flags, if I pull that up again, for doing file inclusion and exclusion. So there's an exclude flag right here. So exclude, include specific directories. And we've taken a lot of inspiration here from the tool ripgrep, which is actually a fantastic alternative to grep if folks haven't seen it. So we're just kind of following a lot of the same flags that ripgrep has. Yeah, did I compare the efficiency and time of test with any SaaS tools? Yeah, so in general, we're looking for the tool. So we want it to feel very, very fast. And I think our goal is that it's running, I forget if it's 10,000 or 100,000 lines of code per second. So we're trying to basically hit this goal for ourselves that it's just wicked fast. The way that we achieve that, and a core difference between other SaaS tools, is that we're not doing whole program analysis. We're only analyzing a single file at a time. So this makes it basically not possible to maybe do more traditional like source and sync analysis. Like in one part of the code base, there's a user supplied parameter. Much later, in a totally different part of the code base, that parameter is executed. So because we're looking at the paved road approach, we're really looking to enforce that people are using the correct methods and using the correct methods and using those methods in the correct ways. So because we're doing single file analysis, it's very, very fast. And the goal here is that you could run it on every single file save without any concern, any problem. You can run on every single pull request, no problem. And even for entire projects, it should be very, very snappy. So I guess that's just kind of like the difference is speed, simplicity of use, ease of integration. So it should be able to just, I want to pop this into GitLab, Jenkins, Circle, GitHub, whatever, pre-commit. Should be super easy to do that. So it's a very portable tool and just really extensible. So if you see something that you want to check for, you don't like a particular rule that somebody else has written, just go in and make that change. Cool. Well, that's it. That's SemGrep in a nutshell. I think I just took you through most of its core features. Would love to get your feedback on it. So play with it in semgrep.live. You can brew install it. If you don't like to use brew or you don't want to install a binary, you can use Docker. So that's available. And there's a growing community of folks. There's about 100 of us now on Slack, and that is linked from our from semgrep.live and from the semgrep README. But there's a group of us on Slack, and basically every day we're going back and forth on, hey, how do I detect this type of thing or this type of problem? And so it's been really, really fun to have that dialogue. So would love to continue the conversation on Slack or over email. That's it. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. That was a very decent presentation. I think everyone enjoyed it. I had a lot of questions, even privately, not only on YouTube. So I posted all of them. You answered all of them. I think this was a very good presentation. I think the tool is very good to at least to check. Do you want to tell us any last sentence or any last recommendation for everyone hearing? And I will wait for some questions that are coming or not.
Yeah, maybe the last thing I'll close out on is I think there's a link to a survey that was sent. Feedback is really good. So both in this presentation, if there's anything that was unclear that I could improve for maybe the next time I give it, I would love that feedback. And if there's feedback on the tool, right? Like I think I'm really curious if folks agree or buy into the fact that instead of reaching for grep when you're searching source code, to reach for something like semgrep, and if that's viable for them, because it's been really useful for me, but I would love to know if that's actually useful for the rest of the community. So there's a survey link, I believe, that was sent out in the YouTube channel, and I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, so actually there are 2 survey links there in the description of the movie and in the description of the video. There is one from you and one from the OWASP to see if you guys want to have more presentations like that or other topics. I think this was very useful. Thank you again, Luke. Thank you everyone for the attention. Dzięki wielkie. Widzimy się pewnie gdzieś za 2-3 tygodnie. Dam wam znać na pewno na Meetupie i na Facebooku. So Luke, have a good day.
Thank you.
Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, would love it. I'll let you know when I'm in Poland post-apocalypse.
Sure. Yeah, I think we need to wait for COVID to be over. Actually.
Yeah, I think a little bit longer, unfortunately, but hopefully can see you all in person at some point.
Sure. See you.
Cool. Take care.